Hey everyone. Can you believe we're already in December? Where did that year go? No. All right. So, you know what December is all about. It's the time where we feel like it's great to slow down. And yet, on the other hand, it's the busiest time of the year. It's like a dichotomy of, on one way, you want to catch up with everyone and connect with everyone you couldn't connect with during the year. And on the other hand, you're exhausted and tired of the whole year that you want to take time off so that you can relax, you can reflect on your year and how you want to move forward. So, today's podcast inspired me to talk about slowing down. It's actually a reminder in my book, Befriend Your Mind, and I wanted to elaborate on it, on how it could be useful to navigate our December rush. So here we go. I was also inspired by an article I came across in the Monocle newsletter. Monocle is a great magazine on culture and people and um, various global issues. I do invite you to check it out if you don't know about it. The Monocle spoke about what's going to be the new travel, and it's really about slow experiences, slow travel. They spoke about a study that was published by the International Luxury Travel Market, where people were sharing how much they want actually more experiences to feel an experience rather than travel quick like, all over the place. So there's that sense of calmness that they're seeking. And I'm not sure if you feel it as well, but the world is really screaming for some sort of peacefulness. I mean, if you switch on the news, what do you see? Chaos. You are torn between, you're very divided inside what to make of all of it. You get on social media, and there's a lot of also injustice, and people are feeling angry, people are feeling lonely. So there's this sense of exhaustion epidemic almost going on. People are feeling worn out and like their zest to live is so low. And it feels negative, but it's like there's that exhaustive marathon that's taking place. And the reason I'm talking about it also is it reminds me of many years ago. I mean, 10 years ago to be exact, where I remember visiting the doctors and telling them, hey, I feel like I've burnt out. And in those days, that wasn't even a topic of conversation. And the doctors would be like, no, you can't be burning out. And I was like, maybe am I getting perimenopause? They're like, no, no, no. And besides, Kirti, you're a yoga teacher. And because I had that label as a yoga teacher, it felt like I didn't have a right to feel stressed. And I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't figure it out at all. And I kept being told, you have the tools already, so use those tools. But the reality was, my body was out of whack. I was also feeling I don't have any desire to get out of bed. I was feeling fluish every month. My joints were hurting. My voice inside of me kept saying, you are burning out and it's time to make a decision. And the reality was that I was scared to make that decision, but I had to because my mental and physical well being, I felt like it was enough being on this rat race. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I'm just going to close shop and take a few months off. It ended up being much, much longer. And that was mainly because I did not know how to talk about it. I did not know what was wrong with me. I often felt like I was being dismissed as, the negative person for talking about my emotions. And that made me very lonely inside. And having to have the strength to pull myself out of it, it took time. And having the strength to get myself out of it took time. So I decided the only way out was to slow down. The only way to get to understand who I am is to look at the so called negative feelings I had and become friends with them. I was thinking about when Buddha had reached enlightenment, he had met, he got a visitor called Mara, and Mara was his enemy. It was to lure him and tempt him into doing things that would provoke maybe lust or pride. And Buddha said, "Come have tea with me." So rather than running away from these kinds of thinking, he invited it as a source of, let me get to know what it's all about and get to the cause of why this is in my energy. And I do believe in that. I'm not talking from a religious point of view. It's a story that reminded me about how to look inside and address the core of why I'm feeling so stressed out. And it was tough initially because I had to learn how to get better with the tools that I had or the resources that I had. So for me, that helped me with my exhausted marathon. And I want to share that way why I feel slowing down could, without feeling guilty, could really help you if you are feeling that way as well. So, how do you know first that you're feeling that way? If you're constantly saying, I am busy, I don't have time, I'm exhausted, who cares? It is what it is. All of those little words are signs that it's hard for it to slow down from the inside. And we also, in the West, we also take a very fragmented approach to our mental health. We treat physical, physical health separate from mental health, separate from emotional health. So you go to the gym, you go to therapy, and you go to coach, and all three can, it's separate. And the way I learned was everything works together, everything interacts together. It's mind, body, speech, connection. And mindfulness is one aspect of that whole thing. And they're all valuable, but if you go deeper or you spend more time with yourself, you can learn how to cultivate genuine care and connection and sincerity for yourself. So, the first thing to do with this exhaustion marathon is being careful what you're putting inside of you. So, while social media and LinkedIn is very useful, especially if you're in working towards how you want to impress someone, it's like a CVE. It's a way of showing up, trying to put your best step forward. But if you're putting your best step forward and it's not coming from a place of genuine sincerity or from what you truly want, and it's more like what you think will give you maximum better financial output, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to end up being really happy from the inside or very motivated or purposeful from the inside. When you get into a job like that where it will demand a lot for you and your inside is not really aligned, you will burn out really quickly that way. So taking care of how you want to show up, you want to invest time in developing a good communications agenda, how you want to show up in different relationships and different situations. When it comes to slowing down, the other thing you might find yourself in a fear of is, how will people see you? Am I going to be seen as weak, or am I going to be seen as I can't do it? I resisted slowing down for a long time because career did matter for me a lot. And I felt that if I would reflect that, so let's say I used to be a yoga teacher. For a yoga teacher to say, I feel weak and I can't handle it, people would automatically start dismissing it. And when you dismiss it, you now start rushing to fix yourself because you think something is really wrong with you because you're trusting other people with what's going on inside of you. And so while I was traveling, I had to get off this speed or this need for wanting advice from other people. And that was like it felt like I was a junkie. I had to get off it. I had to stop myself off from it. And whenever I stopped or tried to get away from it, I felt very lonely. And whenever I felt lonely, like I was excluded, I would go back into wanting to take people's advice. Things happen, and I do agree that things can happen for a reason. So while I was traveling, I wanted to not experience life through touristy ways. I wanted to spend time with myself. And by wandering around the cities, I learned a lot from strangers because I felt I didn't have to live up to their expectations. I could drop my facade and they had nothing to lose, and they would share their life. And I found myself through that caring more and more about being curious and less about how people saw me. So that felt like a lot of relief. And so if you plan to do traveling next year, think about traveling in a way that you can take time for yourself to get to know yourself, not to improve yourself, but just really getting to know yourself, stepping away from a lot of noise and just being able to document and saying, okay, I understand where my values are, where my purpose is, where my principles are, because those are really important drivers and they influence your decisions. But not only do they influence your decisions, it also will help you understand yourself better so that when you engage in different environments or different situations or relationships, you're not going to feel anxious to respond right away because you will give yourself enough time to step back, and because you are able to listen to your difficulties, which is an act of courage, and you step away from your judgment, you are able to ask yourself different ways to maybe how do I want to communicate differently? How do I want to connect? What do I need to take into account? So here are some situations that I do think come up often, especially in this last year. And I want to really invite you again to the whole slowing down, slowing down in a different way. The first one is maybe you want to slow down on your self development. Yes, self development. I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. When you read too many books in a year, some people pride that they read 20 books and 30 books, but when you read so many books, you and you try to sound like really acknowledgeable, it doesn't really mean that you are developing yourself, because knowledge is one thing, but knowledge put into practice is a different thing, because knowledge without practice is a division. It's like a gap. Sorry. It's a gap between trusting yourself and understanding how to apply all the knowledge that you receive. And I call this smart slowing down. So when you smart slow down, it's a way to start taking care of what kind of information you're digesting. If you're interested in reading tons of books, then you're really not focused on trusting yourself anymore. You're not developing your personal trust with yourself. And so by not it's not about not reading, but it's about reading less, being careful what kinds of books you want to choose to read. What is that book supposed to share with you and give to you? I recently had lunch with an amazing, extraordinary friend of mine. She loves to read, and I've asked her many times on podcasts. She's like, no. But she doesn't read a lot of books. She takes her time. She has 3 books that she reads in the year. And one of the books she talks about, is about fantasy world. And I'm like, why do you want to speak about fantasy world? And the reason was she explained to me about developing language and descriptive language and really strengthening my imagination, because if you strengthen your imagination, you're also helping your brain to develop and cultivate. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And so she slows down in the types of knowledge she wants to consume. And that shows and reflects in the way she discusses certain situations with the world. And I would like to invite you to that. Ask yourself, what do I want to read? And maybe what do I not want to read? Be okay to read less and experience life a little bit more. And from that, you will gain the confidence to be natural when you're speaking in those different environments, because you're not really having to pretend, you're not having to fake, but you're having the ability to process from the inside. There's another thing you could do with slowing down is slow down in communicating with others or being in a conversation. Spend time listening. When you spend time truly listening to someone, you will hear the richer perspective in what they sometimes often don't say. I think of a conversation like a cooking, like a recipe, it can bring, when it comes together, it's like this, it really can hit the curious palate, the mental palate, and it can broaden our worldview. And learning to listen without our own values and beliefs in a way, just for a moment, we can actually allow ourselves to see what another person is seeing and how they process and pick up on the little things in their lives that makes a difference. We can learn a lot from each other without having to feel the need to show up that, as an expert or trying to impress one another. Just by listening out of curiosity can make a big difference. And that starts with slowing down from trying to talk in the conversation. Then I move into what is happening that I feel is like this rise of communication fatigue, especially in the working environment. See, besides being in a very divided world, there are a lot of whispers this year about redundancy, and Google having that redundancy early in the year was a very big hit, and it really scared a lot of people. And because of that scare, especially if you're from a different ethnic environment, you feel even more pressurized to show up and do the right thing or try to stay in the lane so that nothing happens to you. And so there's a certain way of wanting to suppress the way we express our opinions because we're afraid how it's going to be. And that suppression often leads into a kind of fatigue because they don't feel understood. Now more than ever, there's a need for deep conversations, especially because the world is so divided and the world is undergoing a lot of change with the introduction of AI and also how working from home, coming back from a post COVID, there is a lot. And so we got to move beyond the mindfulness and start seeing all situations a little bit more intersectional. They're not a one size fits all. And so the importance of effectively communicating really starts in slowing down and listening. Learning to listen so that people also don't feel afraid of expressing themselves authentically. I know we keep telling people to be authentic, but how can people be authentic if there's so much fear and barriers in front of them? I was aware of this recently when I gave a speech at Bloomberg in the UK division, and someone in the audience asked me about how do I know when I'm faking it or when I'm not being authentic? And to ask yourself that question, that is already an indication that you're always weighing up how to speak. And that's what we call code switching. And the only way through that is to recognize that your authenticity is going to change in different environments. And in order to be authentic in different environments and knowing it's going to fluctuate, when you slow down from the way you're listening inside, you can then ask yourself, how do I want to speak in these different environments? How do I want to show up? And that way, you're not stressing yourself, you're not burning yourself out, but you're taking responsibility in the way you want to communicate. The next suggestion I want to share is with women in their 30s and 40s who are very worried about their choosing between their family life and career. And this really inspired me by this trending video on social media by Indira Nuri from Pepsi Cola. And she really summed it up about how women have to divide their responsibilities and how much is on their plate. And being successful and not wanting to miss out, a woman goes through that in her 30s and 40s. And she was absolutely right to share that. And but at the same time, our body undergoes a lot of changes during that time. And if we're a single woman, and there's a lot of questions of should I do any treatments to get a child without having a partner in the life in their lives. That can be very pressurizing on the mental state of mind, and that reflects in the body. Women are burning out at a higher degree, and probably if you look at it, is because they're having to still adopt the same attitude at work as how men have done it. But physically, men are different. Men do not have the same challenges as a woman does. And can men do more? Yes, men can do more by understanding rather than feeling like they're an imposter and they don't have a right to show up. Women in a lot of corporates complain about one thing. It's not that they don't know, women know a lot. It's just that they don't feel that why are there so many things for women having to do to make the change and where are the men to support them? And it's really sad because you don't want to have that discussion still in 2023, but it's still there. So, how can a woman support herself in that moment? And it goes back again, it's about prioritizing. And prioritizing, there's a work life balance, but unfortunately, there's going to be the give and take conversation. Can women have it all is another question. But if they do want to choose to have a child alone, slowing down is necessary, especially from a physical level. The body needs to have to be in a state of not panic, not rushing, so that it can receive and nurture itself to carry another child within. And for a lot of women who have been undergoing that experience and each time have failed or felt like a failure for not to become pregnant, it can be really heartbreaking because you see them go into some sort of emotional numbness. So, having a slow down strategy is actually necessary. It's not about stopping your life, but it's about knowing how to strategically pause for the greater well being. But it's also about slowing down and speaking and having conversations in your work environment so that you can have additional support. Most women will always try to do it alone because they've been raised to be responsible. And with raising to be responsible, and there was a lot of expectations that women end up getting things done, there's a lot of pressure from the past still taking place, and that is causing stress too. So slow down to eliminate old conditions from the past so that you can navigate the confidence or the calmness for the body if you're planning to continue going through to fertility treatments. Last but not least, I want to speak a little bit more about this emotional numbness. As we're going into 2024 and with the way the world is divided, I'm not going to tell you or paint a pretty picture and saying it's all going to go away. No, take care of your sensory organs. Overloading your senses with worrisome information can lead to numbness and can also lead to loneliness and depression. Be okay to disconnect purposefully. Focus on realigning with your core values and principles. Slow down taking information in. Don't react immediately to situations. Allow yourself to listen. Just listen, step back, and give yourself time to shift your perspective if you want to. Understand that not everyone is going to agree with each other. So you want to know when to speak and when not to share. By processing and understanding information, you can then take your time and think about the consequences it has because our language is what moves us forward. So be okay to switch that cell phone off, not look at your WhatsApp messages. Give yourself much space so that you can feel connected back to yourself. I'm not going to tell you to love yourself, be kind to yourself. You can see all of that online. What I'm asking you to is be unapologetic to saying no. And saying yes, that is a way of saying yes to yourself. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You remember you can save it, share it. I really hope you took some notes to reflect on something for next year. Slow down from chasing this month's December rush. Just slow down. It's okay. You can always do that 2024 goal in January. Don't burn yourself out in December so that January has to take care of recovering it. It's okay to go a bit slower this month. Take your time. And next year, I will be doing more master retreats and booster getaways on the tropical island of Curacao and hopefully in Europe. I want to share with you how to slow down, how to bring zest back into your life, how to look at your techniques that you're currently using and shape them so that you have a sharper communication agenda that gives you life into how you want to be so that you're not constantly trying to develop yourself. Also, check out last week's podcast. My guest was Debbie, and she shared her insights on legacy. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Wishing you a peaceful holiday and light ahead. That's a wrap for today's episode. Take care.